All right, howdy, you guys. So I just want to start with an introduction. We are the AGSM 440 Team 1, consisting of Doug Dindy, Dylan Montgomery, Riley Admire, and myself, Damien Salazar, and we're working on a project to help mitigate the spread of COVID in the workplace and just find better solutions to keep everyone safe and healthy. Uh, so uh, our problem is that gyms are essential and they need to stay open during the pandemic, and we're working on solutions for that, and we need to figure out how we can safely and effectively just keep gyms open, keep the employees healthy, and everything just running in a smooth and timely manner. This includes contract tracing, employee housing, and then just truck drivers, anyone who enters and exits the facility, and so on. During our last meeting, we discussed our flow analysis and our three potential solutions. We took a look at our decision matrix and the selection analysis of just why we decided on those three to look into, and kind of gave a brief look into what we were kind of thinking could be the final solution overall, which we'll talk about today. We listened to the feedback from our client and our instructors, and we made necessary changes to just what the feedback was, and we just looked into other ways of presenting our information as well. And just a brief overview of what we're talking over today. Our recommended solution, which is going to be like the key parts. We're going to have a diagram of our, like a brief little diagram of the decision tree coming up later, the uses and how to just open up the decision tree to gens potentially. Just a little brief overview of that. And then our economic analysis, just small input material cost, and then the cost benefit of using the solution that we have at hand. And I will hand this off to Dylan now.
Thanks. I'm Dylan Montgomery. I'm going to go over a little bit about our recommended solution that our team has come up with. So our team has come up with a recommended solution of decision tree, which was our first potential solution. We based this decision off of our decision tree and feedback that we received from our client and instructors after the last meeting. This decision tree will incorporate our site mask requirement and employee self-screening, which we had listed as our second and third potential solutions. We felt that from the feedback from our client that kind of rolling all of these into one kind of decision tree could really be more effective than just a standalone mask requirement or standalone employee self-screening. This decision tree will require minimal implementation costs at this stage of the pandemic. As vaccines kind of ramp up and many people who've had it and recovered have developed antibodies, making large expenditures to try to buy equipment and different things that could be used for this kind of solution may not be feasible at this time. Maybe potentially earlier in the pandemic they could have, but we felt at this time during the pandemic that this solution would offer the best economic and overall safety results. So here's a decision tree example that I found that I think will be really effective in kind of getting the point across of what we're trying to design. This was put out by the University of West Georgia. So in this decision tree, you can see the very top major thing is the listed out symptoms of COVID-19. So no matter who looks at the chart, whether they're familiar with symptoms or not, they'll have a list that they can quickly refer to when determining, yes, I have symptoms, no, I have no symptoms, things like that. And then color coding and just easy to follow tracks throughout the decision tree. It makes it very effective for anybody who comes up and wishes to determine what they need to do. Contact information is important. Also, having this electronic could make it easy for updating CDC guidelines as they're changing all the time, as we've seen. So this is just an example of what we think that our final solution could look like. So some of the key parts of this decision tree that we feel are necessary is, as I stated before, a list of the common COVID-19 symptoms, so that anybody who uses the decision tree can just go through the list. The definition of exposure, uh, as the CDC states, within 6 feet for more than 10 minutes, different things like that. There's sometimes common confusion on being exposed to COVID-19. So just having that definition front and center on the top of the document so that anybody who questions whether they've been exposed can read through the definition and know, immediately, yes, I was within 6 feet for more than 10 minutes of somebody who's positive, then they would know that they've been exposed. We also want it to have an easy to follow decision path. We don't want it to be too much work to get to the end goal of determining what needs to be done. This electronic will allow us to update it regularly with updated CDC self-isolation and quarantine guidelines, and different things like that. And then, as I stated before, we're incorporating the mask requirement, employee self-screening, and so certain parameters will implement those two things at different times. We felt that trying to implement a full-time mask requirement in these areas where they have never had a mask requirement, there could be some pushback from employees, but we feel that with these certain parameters, implementing them, that hopefully the employees would understand that something's happened that has forced us that we need to do this in order to keep the rest of the employees safe. So some of the uses of this decision tree, our goal is for it to be utilized by not just managers, but employees as well. Having it posted throughout the gym, within the offices, and if the gym provides their employees housing, have it posted there as well. That way they don't have to be at work if they want to go through and, make a decision on whether they need to call in sick or self-isolate, different things like that. We also think it's important that we have it both in English and Spanish, because many gyms have seasonal migrant labor crews. So just making sure that no matter who comes up to read it, that everybody can use it and utilize it in the same way. Now I'm going to turn it over to Doug to kind of go over our economic analysis.
Yeah, all right. Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Douglas Dendy. I performed the economic analysis for this section of the project. So here for the next couple minutes, I'm going to be talking about the input costs associated with this solution, as well as the materials costs, and then we'll get into a cost-benefit analysis, excuse me. So first off, as far as input cost goes, this is by far the least expensive solution that we have considered so far. It is practically free to implement this at all gyms, and this is due to the fact that it can be easily constructed and delivered to cotton gins electronically. Next slide, please. So for materials costs, we're recommending that each gym have enough face masks on hand to provide every employee on site with one at any given point in time. That being said, a package of 25 KN95 face masks can be found on Amazon or elsewhere for a price ranging from $35 to $50. Now, the total amount that a gym will have to spend on face masks is entirely dependent upon how many employees they have, so this price will vary from gym to gym. Furthermore, we're recommending that each gym purchase multiple infrared thermometers so that employees with questionable health status can have their temperature taken quickly and efficiently without the need to sanitize the thermometer in between uses. These go for about an average price of $40, and again, can be found on Amazon or elsewhere, and there's a wide variety of makes and models to choose from. And as Dylan touched on briefly, gym managers may want to print and post the decision tree throughout gym facilities so that employees are able to use it. If they choose to do this, various printing materials are going to be required. However, this is entirely optional, and gyms likely already have these materials. For a cost-benefit analysis, this is not a financial problem and therefore cannot be measured by any sort of financial gain in dollars. Rather, the benefit associated with these costs is measured by the improved safety quality within the facilities, as well as the improved ability of gym managers to make solid decisions in the situation that an employee could be potentially infected with the disease. We firmly believe that the small investment in this solution can lead to a much higher quality of safety within the building, and we also believe that it will lead to a dramatic decrease in the number of COVID cases among gym employees. So with that being said, I'm going to hand it over to Riley, who's going to close us out for the day.
Hey guys, yeah, like you said, my name is Riley Eggmeyer, and I'll just kind of be going over what we've talked about today. So to summarize what we talked about, we decided to go with the decision tree solution. It was the highest rated on our decision matrix, and also heard good things from our client about it. And it's also kind of a mix of like all three of our potential solutions into one to help maximize the effectiveness of this solution. This decision tree can be presented as an electronic document sent to all of the gen managers who can provide copies to their employees to help ease the distribution. The matrix will also be made to change along with the CDC guidelines, since they seem to be always changing their guidelines. And speaking on the economic analysis, this solution is the least expensive way to tackle this problem, making this solution even that much better. The decision tree is also very easy to distribute among all the gens. There are no materials needed, just a simple email sent to all the gen managers. And under certain criteria, the gen will have to purchase masks and infrared thermometers with just a one-time purchase of a $40 thermometer and about an average of a $40 mask purchase every month. This solution is still a very affordable effort to make all gens safe as possible. Next slide, please. So where we're at today, we will finalize our recommended solution, even further perfecting our decision tree, making sure it's ready to be sent out and implemented. Also making sure that it's the most safe and effective that it can be. We'll also be working on our risk and implementation plan, accounting for all of the risks that will go alongside this solution and how to mitigate them. Our next meeting will be on April 6th, and if y'all have any questions, we'll be happy to ask or answer them.
Okay, let's, why don't we have our client begin with asking some questions or comments.
Can you go back to the decision tree? I like this a lot. I like it a lot. This one has a path for students and a path for faculty staff. Are you looking at multiple paths, and how are you going to break that down?
Yes, the reason I chose this one is because it had that multiple paths. I think because majority of the time, interior gen crew and maybe office staff will not be commingling nearly as much. So having a different path maybe for office exposures as compared to interior gen employee exposures could be effective. That was my thought process, and that's why this example really stuck out.
Well, I wondered about having one path for workers who live at home and one path for workers. It's almost the same as dorms and faculty, because we have, if you have housing where they're all staying in one house, I want to break it that way.
Yes, sir. Definitely look at that.
What will this deliverable? What form will it be in? Are y'all thinking like Excel or what? I guess if we get it in electronic form, what will that look like?
I think the goal would be to have kind of a final PDF document that could be sent to you, and then you could just easily distribute it however you see fit to whoever it needs to be sent.
How would we update it though if it's a PDF?
That could be we can send the PDF could be our final. We can send you both a document that you could update, and then the final first draft PDF. So if you ever did have to make changes, you can make changes and then export it to a PDF again and send it out.
Yeah, that would be. I wouldn't worry about the mask. I mean, we have some guys that have to wear face protection. Eye goggles. Some people have to wear gloves. They're used to PPE. If you mandate PPE, they'll do it.
Yes, sir. We'll take that into.
That's really good. I think I really like the way you guys are ready.
Thank you.
All right, let's have some peer team comments. So team 2, why don't you make some comments or questions?
Yeah, I think honestly, I like that y'all have incorporated kind of all of your original ideas into one. And I understand the decision tree was one of the original ideas, but I think it was the best route to go with, because when you incorporate all of them, then you work your way down that decision tree and figure out where you need to go based on circumstances.
I had a comment. This might have been better for the previous progress report, but since y'all are combining a couple of those different potential solutions together from your decision matrix, you could, evaluate how that solution all three of them together will work in the matrix. Just to prove, fallacy of composition, just because you put them all together doesn't mean that they're going to be as effective as their parts.
All right, a couple more comments from your team.
I also like the decision tree example. I think it's laid out correctly, and I thought the presentation was pretty smooth.
I like how y'all started it off with like an overview of the last progress report and kind of where y'all left off to kind of refresh everybody's mind to kind of transition instead of just going straight into this progress report. I thought that was well done.
Okay, thanks. Dr. Hart, do you have some questions or comments?
Yes. So I did have something. I noticed in your section when you were discussing cost. So of course the infrared thermometer masks, those have cost. But you were kind of like, what's the benefit to the business? And it was almost like we threw up our hands and we said, we don't know. But I think you could get an estimate. Clearly, if your entire crew gets sick, there's a cost to the gin, a pretty substantial one if you've got to shut down for a few days because you don't have enough people to run. And so I'd suggest that you at least make some estimates of what that cost might be. It's one thing if one person gets sick, but this is something that's highly contagious. And if, half your crew, if it comes a point, you won't be able to gin cotton. So I'd suggest you try to put some numbers together for that.
Yeah, in retrospect, I definitely wish I could have done that. That seems like it is a good idea, but we'll look into that moving forward. I appreciate the input.
And I'll say, Mr. Green can probably help you with a little bit of that data if you need something. And again, it's going to vary from gin to gin, but and I don't think you need an exact cost, but you can, put together a rough estimate of numbers.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Harden. I was going to mention that as well. It was a good presentation, 13 minutes, pretty equally distributed among the four of you. Dylan had the longest time at 5 minutes, and Riley only a couple of minutes at the end, but that's okay. Yeah, we really can't let you off the hook in terms of an economic analysis. You got to do an economic analysis. And here's let me help you out on this. Your problem is that you're focusing on my solution's free. It's a piece of paper. That's not what you're doing the economic analysis on. Not on the cost of the solution, but the impact of the solution. So you need to take a look at what the cost of the gin is at the status quo, and how's the implementation of this solution going to save the gin money. And Dr. Harden gave you a pretty good idea on how that's going to work. So think about that. Yeah, there may be a few costs with masks, but that's really inconsequential. So go down that direction, and he can probably help you, or your client can help you get an idea of the real cost savings of implementing this and preventing the entire gin from getting shut down. There might be some other things that you need to consider. And let me go to my next comment here, is that you've decided on a solution, but you haven't really presented that solution to the client. You showed somebody else's decision tree, but right now you don't have your decision tree. And perhaps that's because this is kind of early in the cycle. You haven't developed that yet. But you need to show your client your decision tree. And I've looked at your paper. I know you started to develop one. But let me give you some guidance on your solution. Number one, it needs to be it needs to be gin specific. Right now, the decision tree I've looked at it's pretty general. I would say it's too general. You could take that decision tree. Have you been exposed or not exposed? Stay at home, isolate, all that. You could use that at a restaurant. You could use that at Home Depot, or you could use it as a gin. You need to develop this to where it's more applicable to what goes on at a gin. And let me give you some examples here. As Mr. Green mentioned, there's employees have different living conditions, so specify that in your decision tree. Do you live, by yourself, or do you live with a group of workers? That kind of detail will help it to be more useful to a gin instead of just very general. Here's a thought: the solution needs to involve more than just the piece of paper, the decision tree itself. One aspect of the solution you might propose is the gin might need to hire some extra workforce to mitigate, and this is where you're going to get in risk mitigation, the loss of workers who have to stay home. So if half the crew has to stay home, what does the gin do? Can they still operate, or are they going to have to shut down? You haven't really developed those options. So yeah, a decision tree is going to tell the workers whether to come to work or stay home, but help the gin manager figure out what to do now. If half my workforce didn't come to work on this shift, how do I operate? So that may mean that he needs to have, if he normally has 12 people on that shift, maybe he needs to have 15 so that he's got some depth to pull from if somebody's got to stay home. So I think you need to kind of work that out a little bit more. And that's something you can still keep. It doesn't have to be specific to every gin, but it's a template that every gin manager could use. I like Mr. Green's question about how do we update this. If you give it to them as a PDF, they can't really update it. Maybe your solution needs to be, your decision tree would be on a web-based thing. It would be on a website, maybe the Texas Cotton Ginners website, and a gin manager could print that off as a PDF, but that way it'd be easily updatable by either the Texas Cotton Ginners staff or, an expensive consulting firm like your team, something like that. So I think you need to develop that decision tree solution a lot more. And let's see, I'm going to pick on Riley. Riley, what do you do with when you have a risk and you want to reduce the impact of that risk? What's that word again? Starts with an M?
Mitigate. I said
mitigate. Yeah, okay.
I noticed right after I said that, I said it wrong.
All right, practice your pronunciation so that doesn't catch it.
Yes, sir.
Otherwise, hey, good presentation, really good style and sound. Your organization and transitions were good. Your slides are good. Your solution isn't developed enough to be satisfactory yet, but I realize it's still early in the cycle.